Say the name Rothschild, and the mind immediately jumps to internet folklore and secret vaults of limitless gold. But if you strip away the modern mythology, the family's actual documented footprint on global history is far larger than the rumors suggest. To understand the scale of that influence, we have to look at November 1917. World War I was tearing Europe apart, and the British government was maneuvering to secure its interests in the Middle East. Out of that maneuvering came a remarkably brief document. At 67 words, the Balfour Declaration outlined British support for a Jewish national home in Palestine. Strikingly, this state promise wasn't addressed to a foreign parliament, but to a private citizen, Lord Walter Rothschild. This creates a historical mystery. How does a single family accumulate the kind of leverage required to act as the official stand-in for an entire geopolitical movement? The answer starts over a century earlier, far removed from the halls of the British Parliament. In the mid-18th century, Mayer Amschel Rothschild was born in the segregated Jewish ghetto of Frankfurt, Germany. He began as a dealer in rare coins, eventually learning the intricacies of banking to become a court factor for local nobility. You can see how he built his empire by looking at this map of his operational strategy. Rather than keeping his business consolidated in one city, Mayer sent his 5 sons to establish branches in the continent's most vital financial centers: London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and the headquarters in Frankfurt. This distributed structure allowed the brothers to operate as a unified, borderless entity. By coordinating joint transactions, they financed loans to warring princes during the Napoleonic era and facilitated international payments that the fragmented banks of the time couldn't handle. They maintained this dominance through strict internal discipline. The brothers followed 2 primary directives. They conducted all transactions jointly and avoided the temptation of high-risk, excessive profits. By acting as the primary lenders to the major powers of Europe, the family became an essential component of state logistics, managing government securities and industrial shares across 5 different capitals. This financial indispensability eventually translated into direct political representation. By 1858, Lionel de Rothschild had become the first Jew to enter the British Parliament, signaling the family's shift from being lenders to governments to being members of them. Decades later, during World War I, the British government found itself dealing with the growing Zionist movement. The problem for British officials was logistical. The movement was largely based in Eastern Europe and lacked a formal, centralized leadership structure to negotiate with. Recognizing this vacuum, the British turned to the Rothschilds. The family's international infrastructure and deep ties to ruling houses made them the only viable central address capable of representing the movement's interests to the empire. The family was not a monolith on the matter. Some members in France and England, like James Rothschild, believed it was better to assimilate into English life and did not support the idea of a national home. However, the delivery of the Balfour Declaration to Lord Walter Rothschild proves the family had successfully converted their financial status into geopolitical capital, effectively acting as a proxy state on the world stage. Once a dynasty has shaped national borders, the focus often shifts towards how to sustain that legacy for future generations. For the 4th Baron, Jacob Rothschild, the answer lay in culture. In 1980, Jacob made a deliberate departure from the traditional family bank. He took independent control of an investment trust and began building an empire focused on a different domain, the curation and preservation of history. Over the next 4 decades, he wielded enormous influence over the public spaces of Britain. Partnering with architect Norman Foster, Jacob spearheaded projects like the pedestrianization of Trafalgar Square, reshaping how the public interacted with historic landmarks. He applied this same strategy to the arts. Serving as the chairman of the National Gallery and the Heritage Lottery Fund, he directed billions of pounds towards restoring national treasures and managing historic estates like Waddesdon Manor. Jacob's work embedded the family name into the physical and cultural landscape of the nation. By focusing on public landmarks and national collections, he ensured the Rothschild identity would remain visible long after the bank's ledgers were closed. On February 26, 2024, Lord Jacob Rothschild passed away at the age of 87, marking the close of a specific era for the family. His career highlights the family's habit of shifting focus across generations, moving from the mechanics of international finance to the levers of state-level geopolitics, and finally into the preservation of national culture. The family has weathered the upheavals of the last 2 centuries by deliberately translating one form of leverage into the next. This compounding influence has allowed the name to endure while other banking dynasties of the 19th century have disappeared. The Rothschild history suggests that power reaches its most durable form when it is expressed through permanent physical, political, and cultural landmarks. Through this blueprint, the family converted temporary wealth into a permanent historical footprint.